Ron Buskert on board. Welcome, everybody. We'll call the March 20th, 2018 Board of Commissioners meetings to order. We'd like to start out with, please silence your cell phones, pagers, and other electronic communication devices. Agendas are at the back of the room. We'd like to start off with a moment of silence and then the Pledge of Allegiance presented by Mark DeSanto.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on our agenda is the review and approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
It's been moved to approve,
Second.
seconded by Farabee. Any discussion? Any changes? With none, we'll do a roll call vote, please.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
Yes.
LaCroy.
Aye. Next on the agenda, I'll recognize Holly Hennies, Commissioner Manager.
Good morning, Commissioners. Holly Hennies, Commission Office Manager. For public notice, the Board of Commissioners uses a consent agenda to act on non-controversial and routine items. The consent agenda is acted upon by one motion and vote of the board. Items may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda at the request of a board member or a citizen. Today's consent agenda contains the following items. Number 5 is approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of March 6, 2018. Number 6 is to acknowledge the notice of intent to conduct a raffle by the Team Ellsworth Spouses Club. Number 7 is to acknowledge the reduction in load limit to 21 tons by the Backcountry Road District on Backcountry Trail. Number 8 is approval of the 2018 seasonal load limits partial submitted by the Highway Department. Number 9 is to recognize and thank the volunteers for the month of February 2018 as submitted by Human Resources. Number 10 is the approval of the request for authorization to reapply for the VOCA and Stop VAWA grants as submitted by the State's Attorney and Victim Assistance Department. And finally, number 11 is the approval of the Joint Powers Agreement for weed spraying services between the South Dakota Department of Transportation and Pennington County as submitted by the Weed and Pest Director.
Thank you, Holly. Is there any citizens in the group that would like to have any items from the consent agenda pulled?
Like number 8 for discussion, please.
We have item 8. Anybody else? Seeing none, does the board have any they'd like to remove from consent? Seeing none, I'd look for a motion to approve all items except for item 8.
Move to approve all items except for number 8.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded by Farabee to approve items 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11. All in favor, roll call vote.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
Yes.
LaCroy.
Aye. That brings us to item number 8, which is approval of the 2018 seasonal load limits. And I'll recognize Mark.
Good morning. Mark Schock, Pennington County Highway. Just wanted to pull this off to let you guys know that we did put our seasonal spring load limits into effect Thursday, March 15th, 2018, and that's 7 ton per axle on all asphalt roads east of Highway 79. But we also intend to enact load restrictions this coming Thursday, which is March 22nd, on all asphalt roads west of Highway 79. So all asphalt roads in Pennington County as of Thursday morning, March 22nd, will have 7 ton per axle load restrictions.
Thank you, Mark. Now, how long are these restrictions?
State statute allows up till April 30th. Mother Nature will dictate. We will remove them as soon as possible, as when the frost has come out of the ground and the roads are now back in stable condition. State statute, like I said, allows until April 30th, and that could be extended by resolution from the Board of Commission, if so need be.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Is there any, Mark DeSanto?
And for public notice, Mark, how do people know that there's a load restriction on it?
We put public notice. We gave that to the dispatch center. We sent out a notice to the Highway Patrol and Sheriff's Department asking for their enforcement. It is on our website. I believe it went into the paper. Sometimes, I'm not sure if it was published this year or not. Sometimes it gets published in the paper, sometimes not, depending on timing.
Are they also marked with flags?
Pardon?
Flags? Do we flag the roads? Red flags?
They are signed.
Signed, okay.
The load restrictions are not into effect unless signed.
Okay.
So they were signed east of 79 last week, and they will be this Thursday west of 79.
Deal, thank you.
So it's,
Mr. Farabee?
so it's going to warm up west of Rapid City next week?
West of Rapid City, what's that, George?
It's going to warm up?
It's, we have experienced found spots
I
where
just-
the roads are leaking up there. That's why we made this decision yesterday afternoon.
It's been a cold winter.
Thanks.
It has.
Ron, you have any discussion? Okay. This is an approval item. I'd look for a motion for approval.
Move to approve.
It's been moved
Second.
by DeSanto, seconded by Buskerud for approval. All in favor indicate by saying aye, and a roll call vote.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
Yes.
LaCroy.
Aye. Next, that brings us up to the Pennington County Comprehensive Plan by Rick Rust, Matrix Design Group. And I'll let PJ introduce the group and explain what's happening here.
Good morning, Commissioners. PJ Conover, Director, Planning Department. Today's agenda item 12 is the Pennington County Comprehensive Plan presented by Matrix Design Group. What Mr. Rick Rust is going to do is go over what has come out of the 9 public meetings that we've held, plus all the one-on-one meetings he's had with staff and various governmental agencies around the county. And then he's also going to talk about some alternative choices that they suggest for the county moving forward with the 2040 comprehensive plan. So I'm not going to take up any more of his time, but I'll leave it to Rick Rust.
Thanks, PJ. Rick?
Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you for setting some time aside for us this morning to go through this. See if we can find our PowerPoint. Okay, so what we're going to do today is go through some general highlight items in the front, talking about where we've been, what documents are out there currently, recapping the workshops and kind of the basis for a lot of the information that we're presenting. And then we're going to go into some alternative choices to highlight some things that have come up and some suggestions for how to address those. Little background again, it's been a few months since we've been here, but wanted to highlight again that the comprehensive plan is really the foundational document for planning. And when we say planning, it's not just land use planning, it's also resource planning and all those things that go into looking at how we utilize the lands and resources within the county. Now, there's more specific documents, your zoning codes, site plans, et cetera, as you go further and further into the site specifics, and they get more detailed. But in the theory of it all, everything should be consistent with the comprehensive plan, and the comprehensive plan should provide a policy basis that is guide for you when you're making your decisions. The comprehensive plan provides a long-term look out to 2040, is the case for this comprehensive plan. It's comprehensive in nature, covering everything from land use to economic development to public safety to natural resources. So it covers a broad gambit of those things that might be considered. But it's also general in nature. This is not a zoning code, so when we tell you about a piece of property, we don't tell you what the setbacks might be. That's left for the zoning code as it gets more specific. But this is supposed to be our vision for the future, and provides a land use diagram and policies to help guide future decisions. Why was this being updated? To correct out-of-date information. to address current opportunities and challenges facing the county, to look at correcting some inconsistencies and redundancies within the document, and restructuring it for ease of use and application. After we complete the comprehensive plan, we also will provide recommendations for updates that might be necessary in the future for the zoning ordinance, subdivision regulations, nuisance ordinance 106, and the floodplain ordinance. Now, those won't be updated themselves as part of this process, but yet it'll be sort of a work plan for what might need to be done to bring it in consistency with the direction of the comprehensive plan. And again, what else might be out of date, redundant, or poorly phrased to provide you with guidance. As far as where we are in the project, in phase one project management, that goes throughout the project, so we won't be done with that until we're done with the whole thing. But we've gone through the community assessment, the framework document. We talked about how we would create the document. We've gone through most of the public workshops at this point and through this week, and we'll talk to you a little bit about those. And we're at the point now of developing the draft policies and strategies. All this moving towards having a document and a hearing with yourselves in June, and looking to wrap that up with a public draft that'll be out in May, and another set of public workshops, as well as Planning Commission hearings at that time. So I highlighted a bit of the things that have been completed to date, including the existing conditions report, which I believe we've provided copies for all the commissioners to have, which provides a good look at the existing conditions and trends that are influencing the county, and is a good foundation for the document. Your current comprehensive plan has the existing conditions mixed into the policy, which makes it a little more cumbersome to use the document, because you just want to find the policies that direct your decisions. You don't need to wade through the existing conditions of population growth. So this is a separate document that will be on that. It also can be updated in the future without having to go through a comprehensive plan amendment. As PJ alluded to, we've done 9 community workshops. These are all done in sets where we go to 3 different locations in a given week. And we've got another set of them happening starting tonight in Hill City. But these workshops, and we'll talk about what they went through. Here's the announcement that was used for the workshops this week. They all start at 6 p.m. We'll be at the Hill City High School tonight. Tomorrow we'll be in the Wall Community Center. And then on Thursday in Rapid City at the Black Hills State University campus. So the existing conditions report, as I mentioned before, provides a good look at existing conditions and trends that might be influencing the future. This document is available for the public to have a look at. If you go to the view2040.com website, and under the resources and online library, it is there, as well as it's right now on the homepage of the website, so it can be downloaded. And we'll be updating this as we go to the final document, but this is a good first cut at what we have found. Just to highlight a few of those items, and we've shown you a couple of these pictures before, but for those new to the audience, population comparisons, Pennington County is the second most populous county in South Dakota, falling right behind Minnehaha. We looked at this chart before talking about overall population growth, and while the county is continuing to grow at a fairly steady rate, you'll notice the green part on the bottom is the unincorporated areas. What has happened over time is typically as areas grow, they are often incorporated into one of the communities. And so that population, while it's growing in the county overall, is not part of the unincorporated population growth. So there is a scattering of development that happens out in the unincorporated area, but it's overshadowed by the amount of development that gets incorporated into the cities, especially into Rapid City. By 2035, looking at the population growing out to a little bit over 130,000 persons. This was projected by the South Dakota State University as far as their projections of population growth. So when we look at the overall change, this is what we're kind of aiming towards. Employment by industry, educational services, healthcare, social assistance accounts for almost a quarter of the jobs within the county. Arts, entertainment, recreation, accommodation, food services. So this is more of your tourism industry is falling into this category at about 13%. And then retail trades picking up almost another 13% of the employment base in the county. The The existing conditions report also contains a number of maps. The maps are great because they give you a visual picture of what's happening in the county. Now, some of the data for this is the existing land use. This is based on the assessor's look at what they consider to be existing land use. Now, you see a lot of large yellow squares, especially on the eastern side of the county. Well, those are 40-acre kind of lots with a single house on them. So this isn't a representation of how populous the area is, but those lots that are attached with a tax rate that's showing them as residential or having a residential structure. This gives a sense of where the building permits have been issued. Now, again, wouldn't look at this as the size of the parcels, but it kind of shows you as you get darker colors, that's more recent development. And so the most of it, as we said, is happening in the Rapid City area and down some of the valleys. So where you see the oranges and the reds, these are things that have happened in the last decade or so. And you can see a lot of the strong development pressures out to the southwest of Rapid City, and then parts going further out from there. Public lands, not a surprise to anybody that public lands are a large component of what makes up Pennington County, whether it be a national park or Forest Service lands or the Air Force. These are some larger components of the county that flavor some of the planning because they flavor what can and cannot be done and what regulations apply from the county standpoint. Where your jobs are located in the county, no surprise again, but the concentration of jobs is in Rapid City, with other communities picking up some smaller distribution of jobs as we move out into the other smaller incorporated communities. This gives you a trend line looking at what's happened from 1870 or 80 all the way through about the 2010, 2012 timeframe as far as your growth. Residential has had a slight upward tilt, as you can see, and in both these graphs you see it's quite variable. Year to year, you get quite a bit of shifting of what might be going on. You can recognize some of the recessionary periods that happened and times and how that depressed the follow-up pieces. Now, commercial properties have had a much stronger growth rate, especially as you go through the 50s through the 90s kind of area. We've had some tailing off in recent years as some of the areas have built out for meeting the current need. But again, it still has an overall upward trend as far as demand. Now, I talked about the breadth of the background report. We're also looking at things like infrastructure. This map here, the red squares, show bridges that have reduced load ratings as we look at how we move through the communities. So looking at things such as bridge and road conditions, looking at items such as public safety. This is a map showing all the fire districts in the county and the location of fire departments that serve the county. We're just kind of giving you a broad brush of what's in this document so you can investigate this a little bit further later. On the monitor, the TV monitor shows a little better. You can see the yellow is where you have high fire susceptibility for wildland fires, and the red outlines are actually historic outlines of those fires that have occurred in the county. So wildland fire is an important piece, and this was brought up in some of the interviews and public workshops we talked about, and something that we talk about in the plan. So that was a quickie highlight of this 100 and some page document. Again, that's available on the website for those that would like to look into it. And if there's any comments or corrections or people would like additional information put in that document, there's a comment tab on the website, as well as any input the commission would like to provide. I was going to move on to highlighting what we've heard in the public if there's no questions.
I have one question. When you were going through your workforce, it seemed like the numbers didn't quite work out yet. 13%, you had the hospital, those type people. I think that was 23%. Then you had 12% in the service industry, 12. Did you see that, 13?
That's the top three categories. There's a whole bunch of others.
Oh, okay.
But they get much smaller as you go out.
Just that little piece, the top three. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we have manufacturing and other kind of components, and they fall below that 10% range usually.
Okay, thanks.
And actually in the document, there is a full pie chart that breaks out all the sectors.
Okay.
Well, if I could, I'd highlight what we went through in the first three sets of public workshops. The first public workshops, what we were doing is we did a general participation survey, where they're from, and looking at what are some of their key issues and opportunities they would like to be addressed going through here. We also asked them for some help in developing a vision statement. That is, what would you describe the county as being in the year 2040? From this, some top issues that came up were a lack of affordable housing. Now, affordable housing doesn't necessarily mean subsidized housing, but in the case of starter homes, things that people that work in the community can get their first home and start a family. Road maintenance and issues with road districts, lack of year-round jobs in some locations, and different levels of service for rural and urban communities. Now, we'll highlight in some of these issues, some of these are more pronounced in different parts of the county. We have 3 different areas that we do public workshops in, and we get different answers depending where we might go. For instance, up in the foothills, they may be more concerned with septic capabilities, whereas out on the east side, they didn't care about that at all because of the size of the land they have available to them. We talk about lack of year-round jobs. That, again, was a big issue up in the Hill City Keystone area, but not as big, obviously, in the Rapid City Valley area. So these all have some geographic differences to them. And as we go forward to the draft plan, we will be looking at how to change policy to address specific areas as opposed to broad brushing the whole county, which is quite diverse. Top opportunities, recreational amenities and opportunities were an opportunity there. Good natural resource conservation practices is an opportunity. Now, these are not things, this isn't like these are good now, but this is stuff that can be taken advantage of, things that are great in the county that we should look at emphasizing. The tourist industry, educational institutions, the potential for value-added agriculture, and historic resources that might be available in the area and making use of those. Workshop number 2 then took some of that initial input that we got when somebody might have said an issue is roads. Okay, well, we don't really know what that quite meant. And so at the second workshop, we actually took some of those key words people told us and asked people to explain further what that meant to them, what was at heart of the issue. We also took the initial inputs on the vision statement and asked people to help refine the words that were there. And as far as the vision statement that came out of that, public input, it was Pennington County is a unique part of South Dakota that is built on a sense of community and a frontier spirit. We pride ourselves on protecting the natural, cultural, and historic resources that help define our social identity and values. The county continues to grow in a manner that maintains water and air quality, improves career and housing opportunities, and retains our excellent schools and quality of life. Now, again, this is how they describe the county in the year 2040. So some of these may be a little bit more aspirational. In some areas of the county, obviously the differences may be more aspirational or something that you want to maintain, but this is what they described as their picture of the future. So the key topic areas that were talked about as far as things we were looking for them to refine dealt with housing, tourism, transportation, natural resources, value-added agriculture, and building codes. So for each of these, we asked them some specific questions. For things like housing, we asked them to actually tell us where they thought were the places in the county that could use some more housing. So they put a mark on the map, and we will use that to help look at our future land use map going forward for proposals. The third workshops, we started getting into land use designations and how they may be configured. Looked at trying to gain a relationship between the different items that had come up. We also held a charrette with many of the departments here, asking them the same questions and telling them things that we had heard and getting them to respond to that as far as what's happening, how it's being dealt with, and if that's truly an issue or what might be being done with it. The workshops tonight, and you've got a handout in front of you dealing with what we call policy choices, or alternative choices in this case, covering more than just policy. But these are some items that we're going to go through with the public tonight. And what we wanted to do today with the commissioners is to pose to you some of these choices. Now, we're not asking for a vote on any of this stuff, but we would like to know if, as we go through these, if there's any items that you think are missing from the choices, or if you think there's anything that just wouldn't be acceptable to continue down that path.
I'll give
And again, these
we'll
are
give them a
based-
minute to look through it, just a sec.
Oh, sure. And we're going to bring each one up on the screen separately for
Okay.
you, too. As we go through this, the policy choice pieces are on the front page, and then also they're on the front of the single sheet that's inside. The rest of it dealing more with land use topics. That's towards the end of this discussion. So the items that we're presenting, again, were based on input we've received at the community workshops as well as interviews that we've conducted. And again, we're looking just for some head nods on if these are in the right path, if there's a choice to be made, which ones you might prefer us to look into, or if there's anything maybe missing. So we talked about the lack of affordable housing, and the discussion from the public often was the fact that there were no starter homes for many families starting out, or perhaps even multifamily capabilities that might be at a more affordable range. So some of the choices that were out there to looking at allowing multifamily residential along major road corridors, something the county doesn't do a whole lot of and is usually done in the cities, but is a possibility in the county as well. The major constraint on that is having access to some type of waste disposal out of a higher concentration. Work with cities to allow more multifamily residential. That is, as we talk with a partnership with the cities that make up the county, talking about how to better meet some of the needs of employers that might be in the county as well as the city itself. Allow a range of housing densities in the county. That is, looking at more of the subdivision style designations. In fact, when we talk about land use designations at the end of this presentation, we will talk about adding a few more categories into your comprehensive plan that will allow for a range of smaller housing types that might be appropriate on the outskirts of some of the communities. And to encourage the development of starter homes in and near communities, and some of that is through enhancements of density. So again, if we're looking at anything in here that may be of concern, if we were to take that direction, in this case, I believe you could pick all the above if you're in that category. Some of these will be more of, they have opposite directions, but in this case, it's kind of asking if you're interested in diversifying some of the housing options that are available in the county areas.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. DeSanto.
I think that that's important. I think that three of these take into consideration proximity to work. If they're starter homes and low-income homes, they're probably going to need, many of these people might not have transportation and that kind of stuff. So taking into consideration, allow multifamily residential along major road corridors is a good idea. And working with the city where these low-income houses or more affordable starter homes are in close proximity to where these people will be working.
So you're picking the top two you'd concentrate on, Mark?
Yeah, I think that's probably the two major focuses that I would look at.
I would tend to agree with Mark, but I'd also add the encouraged development of starter homes in the near communities. I'd like some input probably about the allow range of housing and densities in the county.
And sir, you may wish to hold that conversation to the end when we tell you what we thought you might do with your land use designations, and that might be a little bit more clear what we're thinking.
That'd probably help. So when we go through these, you just like little feedback?
Just what you did there is awesome.
Does anybody else have any comments on the lack of affordable housing they'd like to share? See none. Go ahead.
Item B talks about roadway maintenance. Some discussion about poorly maintained roads, which can be hazardous, other conditions. A lot of this was tied back to some road districts that perhaps aren't, they're managed in different ways. They have different setups, different financial capabilities to actually manage their own roadways. There was some discussion in some meetings about, well, do we really need them? And there's obvious financial reasons for why the county has had to depend on these in order to allow development, but some concerns nonetheless. Discussion about, forming partnerships with established road districts to improve conditions. In some cases, some people thought that some of the districts could use a little assistance, whether it be technical or just knowledge base, or even the fact of somebody bringing them together so they can get a better cost in doing road maintenance as opposed to doing everybody as a one-shot thing. Provide educational materials to the public regarding road district requirements and how that setup works. Identifying funding to expand annual road maintenance in the county as far as general county roads. and help ensure road districts are fiscally sound when initially set up. There's a range of stories that are out there, and each district's different. Some districts do a wonderful job of maintaining the roadways to just what the people that live there want, and some not so much. So kind of all over the map.
Thanks, Rick. I think, George, do you have any comments on the road, on this?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, he has no comments. The two that I marked up, I don't know if anybody else has, is I'd like to provide the educational materials to the public regarding districts' requirements and probably help ensure road districts are physically sound. That's kind of sticks out in mine.
Okay.
I would say all four
All
are
four.
important. Something that I think came to us as a surprise to Lloyd and I, we were at the city-county meeting. And a lot of people think that the county or the city are responsible or can act upon railroad crossings and repair of road and railroad crossings. We've got a lot of bad railroad crossings. From what we understand now, it takes up to 2 years to get the railroad to approve the work that's being done on those crossings. So to maybe educate the public a little bit more, like providing educational materials, let them know that it's not necessarily that we don't want to address it, it's that we can't.
Yeah, I think knowledge about what the county has in its purview and how that relates to road districts is very important.
Item C.
And I did want to note, you do have a number of your planning commissioners here as well.
Yes.
They've got the handout in front of them.
Yeah, we should probably take some comments with them on this also. I'll open that. Does anybody from the planning commission or public have any discussion on the last two that Rick's gone over so far? I'll make a point when he's done to ask again, so people will have an opportunity.
And these go through the letter L, just to give you a heads up, so.
Okay.
Little way to go. Lack of diverse job opportunities. Talked before about the annual employment that may come with full-time jobs as opposed to the seasonal employment that come with the tourism industry, perhaps. Some of the ideas that had been posted out there were to support existing industries such as tourism by expanding commercial uses that are near highways and urban centers. A lot of this happens right now commercially anyway. Support existing economic drivers such as Ellsworth Air Force Base and Rapid City Regional Airport by providing open space and agricultural buffers or to protect them relative to the kinds of land uses that go around them. Expand industrial-based job opportunities by expanding heavy industrial land uses. So if there's some areas that could be expanded, I know the designation is used often for some mining activities, but to have land available for things other than mining to provide that opportunity. Create incentives for drawing in new industry. Now, from a comprehensive plan standpoint, this might be an encouragement to do such things. The actual identification of that incentive or how that would get funded would be something that would be for future work, but it might be something we don't encourage. And then also to look at developing business retention programs. How do we keep those good employers that we have here today still here? So these were some of the key areas that had been brought up as far as directions they would like to see covered in the comprehensive plan.
Okay, thanks, Rick. I think what we'll probably do is have you go through them, and then we'll have open comment afterwards.
Okay.
That seems like that's going to work best. If we go through L, we could be here a while.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll go through L, and then we'll come back to C and start down comments for that. Better limits on animal keeping in suburban settings. Now, you've got a committee that's working on this right now, and some of the results from that committee may be available and ready for us to incorporate in here. But the discussions in the meetings often came down to animal keeping. Chickens were often talked about that were in areas that had small lots in their minds, things that might be in the 1-2 acres or less even. So it requires zoning to be updated to specify limits on zoning districts and lot sizes. That a lot of communities and counties have X number of types of animal units that can be kept based on how big a lot is. And you have to define what those animal units mean. Is a chicken and a cow the same thing? And there's all sorts of trade-offs that can be made. And then there's also a discussion about just eliminating animal keeping, and when I say animal keeping, I'm talking about farm animal types, not keeping the dog and the cat and hamster. But maybe setting a bare minimum that you have to have at least, let's say, an acre. And I left it blank here because there was no clear definition at that time as to what that should be. Lack of building codes. The lack of building codes in the county, and then even the lack of inspections to ensure that buildings are put in the way that they were designed and approved, was brought up by a number of individuals. So creating building codes that are specific to the county that cover the broad brush beyond just what the state authorizes, to adopt the 2015 International Building Code in its entirety or with some localized changes. And then the discussion about requiring building inspections for residential and commercial structures. This isn't currently done in the county. Most jurisdictions that do this by doing a fee on the development to pay for the cost of the inspector. Mining activities occur both in agricultural and industrial areas. There was lots of comments about where mining could go, should go. It's currently allowed in 2 different designations. Agricultural being one of them, which is very widespread in the county. Some individuals were more interested in having a mining overlay or some other kind of information that could tell you where it may be appropriate or where there are infrastructure available to supply it. Concerns over impacts on water quality and water quantity for some mining activities were also brought up. This again is something that is being worked on in the county. You've addressed hard rock mining and looking at mineral mining now as well, and that might be rolled into what we've got going forward. Enhancing tourism. Create tourist commercial designation to allow more flexibility. We mentioned this, and you'll see this when we get to the land use designations later. There's some discussion about wanting more flexibility on things such as signage. One way to control that flexibility is to designate certain areas that might be more appropriate for that type of use, that might be more appropriate to higher intensity visitation areas. Supporting agri-tourism industries, that is taking products that are made in the county or products that are grown in the county or raised and turning them into a secondary product through milling or processing or other kind of activities where you keep more jobs and more revenue inside the county. And through agritourism to use people visiting the county to use this as an opportunity to experience the West. And that comes with trade-offs because you have to have a designation that allows that type of thing. Or there are rules that need to be put on that to make that so it doesn't impact on its neighbors. Work with State Department of Transportation and the U.S. Forest Service to expand bikeway and trail opportunities. This was seen as an important piece of what people want to come to the county for, is to experience the outdoors. Expand tourism opportunities in the Eastern Plains area out towards Wall and other communities where there might be some other opportunities, and evaluate potential for use of tiny homes or similar on some short-term stay basis as another way of providing housing options for those visiting the area. Overlays. We have basic designations, your general agriculture, your commercial designations, and they provide a range of things that can happen in certain areas. But there may be opportunities to have overlays, that is a modifier, if you will, areas that allow something a little different. I mentioned before the tourist commercial idea. You could have an overlay for tourism where you allow different kind of sign regulations, perhaps. You might have special overlays for flood hazard areas, timber harvesting, agricultural protections, if there's certain areas you want to protect for that in the future. Scenic resources. Again, that could also tie into criteria for signage. If you have a scenic resource and you don't want it blocked, you may have a different sign regulation. I keep mentioning the signs because these are the contexts that often came up in discussions in the public. And this tourism overlay we talked about. Mining we talked about just a little bit earlier. Signage. Mixed bag, a lot of discussion. In some of the areas, especially up towards the Black Hill areas, there was a lot of support to have some signage because they make their living for many off of attracting in the tourist traffic that's on the highways out in the area. But countywide, there was pretty unanimous about not wanting large digital billboards, and the concerns about the bright lights and the issue that could cause in a snow condition and distraction on roadways and the safety of that. So I think pretty much we had unanimous consensus of those weighed in that they were looking to have some controls on those. Looking at additional restrictions on placement, size, spacing in a number of specific areas, and updating the sign code to be content neutral. There's some Supreme Court case dealing with content neutrality. There's some changes that may be coming up to the courts as well, but this is about overall changing your codes so that you don't talk about it being a reality sign, but you talk about it being a certain size in a certain context. So it's not necessarily what you say on the sign, but how you present it. Protecting Ellsworth Air Force Base and the regional airport. Mentioned this a little bit earlier, but this was a separate topic. There is a Ellsworth JLUS, which is a joint land use study, which describes a number of items that some of the cities, such as Box Elder and the county itself, and even Meade County to the north, can do to help protect these facilities, Meade County being for the Ellsworth. To work with Ellsworth Air Force Base and SEDETA, or the South Dakota Economic Development Authority, and protect and expand the missions at the installation, bringing more jobs to the area through maybe spin-off things, and promoting the ability to attract more of these industries, perhaps through public-private partnerships, that's what that PPP is, or through incubator space that might allow small aero firms to come into the area. Resource extraction, we have a variety of conversations about this, from support to some desires to have better controls to desires not to have any more. So it kind of went the whole gambit, and different areas had different feelings. But there was some comment on looking at what the county might be able to do to better control traffic coming out of these types of facilities, to require better bonding to assure effective reclamation at the end of the mining process, to clarify the difference between hard rock and mineral extraction and how those might pertain to the comprehensive plan, and to engage with the state to ensure protection of water quality from an advocacy standpoint, since they're ultimately responsible for that type of thing. And L, the end of our line. Wildland fire potential. As I showed you on that map earlier, almost half the county is susceptible to a high hazard of wildland fires. And so should there be additional things done as far as fire-wise guidelines for new construction? These are things such as enclosing the eaves of a house, or ensuring that you use concrete roof tiles, or that you have a defensible space around structures in part of your design. And then also discussion about the need to work with the federal government to better manage their fuel loads on properties that they manage, such as the U.S. Forest Service, and ensuring that dead trees, especially from some of the insect damage, are taken out to reduce the overall potential for wildland fires. So that's a good stopping point.
Okay, Rick, now you wanted some public comment back on these, correct?
Well, actually, I can give you
And
the
the-
choice on that. We have 3 public workshops, and this will be on their agenda tonight. So part of it is, if they would like to join us, you could certainly refer them there or take comment now, whichever is your pleasure. The commissioners certainly can weigh in for you too.
Does the board think that we can go through ours and mark them off and give them to them?
I think so, yeah.
And then I think we have some planning commissioners here who probably might want to speak on some of this. Is there anybody who, from the citizens or the planning commission, would like to speak on these at this time? So I think that's what we'll do, is we'll fill these out and we'll get them to you, Rick. I think you brought up I think there were some good discussions throughout all those, and I think we may be checking all the boxes on most of those, but I think this is a good way to get some information back from us.
And the most important thing would be for you to cross out anything you just don't think has legs to it. It's not going to play here. And if there's anything that we're missing that you think is a major opportunity, to let us know what else to look at.
Okay.
What we're taking from this at this point is this will be the direction upon which we will develop policies. So when you get the draft plan, the hope is that we can get a little bit more in the ballpark what you're looking for.
I think you got a wide variety in there, so, okay.
So, Would you like to go through any of them, or would you like to go to the next thing on land use?
I think Mr. DeSanto has one.
Okay.
One thing that you touched on G, enhanced tourism, I think that I've lived in several different areas in my lifetime, and working with the DOT and U.S. Forest Service to expand bikeways and trails, I've seen where those expansions have created great economic growth in Spokane, Washington, Lewiston, Idaho area, Boise, Idaho area. So I think that's a good idea to focus on that type of expansion.
And if I could, our goal would also be to suggest places where you might want to focus that on. Often the failure here is you just shotgun it out there, and you get a couple blocks here and a couple blocks over there, and it doesn't create any kind of path. For bikeways, people like to go a few miles, not a few hundred feet.
Right.
I'd have a suggestion, Mark. I think there's abandoned railways.
That's what I'm thinking. That's basically what they've expanded on in
Yeah.
most of those other areas I'm talking about are abandoned railways.
Okay, great.
And then J, we looked a lot at the three areas of how to expand Ellsworth, but didn't talk a whole lot about what to do with to help expand regional airport. And I see that as a very, very key factor in enhancing the reason for businesses to come to Rapid City. One of the things that I've heard quite a bit is that the cost of air cargo transportation is very high here. And also, obviously, as we all know, the cost of individual transportation is high here. And that's kind of a thing that goes around and around, because if we don't get more business here to increase the ridership, then it's difficult to bring the cost of air transportation down. So that's an area that needs to be focused on, I believe, also.
We'll add items towards that.
Ron, did you have any suggestions, Ron, at this time?
No, I don't. I thought it was informative, and I think they've hit most of the important things. So I agree with Mark on a couple he just said. So
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Thanks, Ron. George, you have any?
Nothing at this time, no.
Rick, I think you guys did a good job. I think each one of these, and I think hit on something that we need to work on, so I appreciate. Is there anything that you've heard that sticks out in your mind that the public, from all the public meetings that you had?
That sticks out. I think the idea that designing the plan to reflect the three different geographies of the county has been proven out as something that's needed. The actual, how that gets played out, we'll be working on over the next month. But there are different needs for the different parts of the county, and we are looking forward to ways to make that addressed differently. We just don't have the same kind of needs on the east side as we do on the west side.
Sure. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak?
Sunny Rivers Planning Commission. I'd just like to tie the lack of affordable housing to the lack of building codes. Lack of building codes relates to the lack of affordable housing. Building energy efficiency is very low in our state. South Dakota, Wyoming, and North Dakota are the lowest ranked energy efficiency states in the country. And this is, I'd like to just note that this is part of our affordable housing issue, especially with older homes that have very low energy efficiency. This does, of course, increase the costs of living. On another point for attracting new business, incubators could be very useful for new small businesses to get started. And those two items are what I was most concerned about. Thank you.
Thanks, Sonny. I think Sonny hit it with the affordable housing, I think is a big topic, and you do have highlighted tiny homes or smaller square footage ones that you're going to work on also. and building codes, so. Is there any other further discussion? Do you have some more, Rick?
Beyond policy, we've got more. And this is something we want to get a little feedback on because this is a good amount of work to do one way or the other. And part of this is looking at how we might refocus some of our land use designations. And this chart up here and on the following slide shows some of the changes that we're looking at. The first one's in agriculture, and we're looking at actually combining the two different designations you have now into one. Now, this does not affect anybody's tax designation as an agricultural entity. This is separate from that. This is more of just looking at this from what a comprehensive plan in the state typically does, and it's looking at lands that are more towards agriculture. The one thing I do want to point out overall is, besides these changes that we might be proposing to the overall map, it's some feedback from the commissioners about consistency. For instance, right now in your agricultural designations, there's over 5,500 parcels in the county that are less than 10 acres in size. So they don't meet the minimums for any agricultural designation. What we would like to get your permission to continue looking into is we can propose what they might need to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. That is, to redesignate some of those properties. Again, this wouldn't affect their tax rates, but it would make it so that they're consistent. In the long term, if you're inconsistent with the comp plan, your zoning would be inconsistent, then you start to have a long-term inconsistency, which can make you a non-compliant property, which can cause you problems getting loans and other things in the future. So getting everybody in the right category is important. And that transitions into something we're going to show you next, which is the residential categories. Because what we've done is expanded the residential categories to pick up things that are on the lower or the higher density kind of end, potential for multifamily. And in the county, that may be more of a duplex, triplex situation than it is a larger apartment complex. But also to better break down what you have. In your residential side right now, you've got a low density residential and a suburban, and they vary quite a bit in what's allowed, and there's some gaps in between there as far as homes. So we're proposing to break that into a ranchette residential, a rural residential, low density, suburban, and urban residential. These get more intense as you go down the chart. But it gives more choices to characterize what can happen here. This can also be helpful as you get towards your animal keeping look, and that you can actually use some of these designations to define what might be allowable in certain designations. So when you're talking about a suburban residential at 60 ewes per acre, keeping chickens is probably not a good choice. But once you get up there, this may give you something you can go off to say what's allowed in certain kind of categories. Just an example. But it also better characterizes what's expected on these properties. So when you have areas on the fringe of communities, if you have an area you think will transition to Rapid City or Box Elder in the future, what are the densities that are appropriate? How might that be served as they go to a city water system, city sewer system? What are the potentials out there for that property to better serve its needs? For the things that stay in the unincorporated area, providing the more affordable housing is often tied to property. The land cost itself is a cost of that. And if you can get community water or sewer out to some of these areas, provide a smaller lot footprint, you can provide more towards a starter home, as opposed to what's happening now in some areas where you're having very large property costs and serving yourself. So this isn't telling you exactly where these are happening. We're working through that math right now. But the couple big questions are you supportive of looking at changes that need to be made to bring things into compliance with the designations, whether they might be? So the example for agriculture was one I threw out there. Again, you've got a large number of things that are zoned agriculture that are less than 10 acres in size and don't fit that category, where they may be more of a ranchette residential type thing. Is that something you would like us to continue to bring forward to you? And our plan is that we would show you not a future land use map with everything colored, but to say, here's where we took that designation and changed it to this one. So everybody can see where their property may be, what the change was, and why it was happening. So we're not asking you to redesignate anything, but just if this is something you feel is an appropriate path to go down.
So what you're asking is that, like, proposals, bring it back and no final judgment, just being able to research it and show it to us at a later date.
we're proposing this set of land uses. We think it gives you a better distribution of types. And then we would go through our online mapping. We would go find the parcels that don't fit into the categories right now, propose what they might be. Now, there may be some parcels that may stay one way or the other. It might not be as consistent because of what's around them. We may also have ownerships. We'll have to look at if somebody has a 5-acre home site that they sold to their kid, but they've got an 80-acre ranch next door, we may not want to change that. So we're going to have to look at these in the context they sit. But in a general sense, if we have things on the outskirts of some of the cities that just really aren't ag anymore, they don't fit the category anymore, and they're really being used for a ranchette residential, perhaps it should be called that.
What's consensus of the board?
I don't have a problem with them continuing on this path. I think that as we grow, those designations are going to need to be in place anyway. So.
Yeah, I agree. Ms. Farabee?
No comment at this time, no.
Okay. Ron, do you have any disagreements with them moving forward with what they're doing?
No, I like that idea.
Okay. There you go. I agree.
The final piece is we're going to look at rewickering a little bit of the names and some of the commercial and stuff to make them better fit their circumstance. The ones I wanted to point out as a big deal is you have a designation called, we have public land, which we are going to show more as an open space category. Open space in the sense that it's for resource management. It's also for resource extraction, such as timber harvesting, et cetera. These are mostly your public lands. But typically in a comp plan, you talk about what something's being used for more than who owns it. So we're just name change in that sense. You do have a designation called PUD sensitive, which for all we've tried to ask, nobody quite knows exactly where it came from or what it's designed to do, other than it looks like it was used to fill in the holes that weren't filled in. So we're looking to propose what those should be. Some cases they may be ag, they may be rural residential. Some of them might be more suburban type residentials or industrial type uses. They're scattered all throughout. Most of them are probably on the west side of the county. A lot of them just to the west of Rapid City, some up in the hills, and they do look like they were just leftover pieces. Nobody knew quite what to put on them. If somebody would like to use it for a PUD in the future, none of these seem to have that going forward. They certainly can apply for that. A PUD really should have a plan in mind before you get a PUD designation. So we don't think that's harming anybody that way. This will actually give them some clarity about what it could be used for, and it also doesn't require them to go through a PUD process, and in fact, it could just be developed. Then we're also going to add a Native American lands category because we do have tribal lands within the county now, and so we'll make sure that we designate those appropriately. They'll just be a white designation on the map as opposed, there will be no land use control over it, but just to designate that as a type. So those are the big changes coming. Because of the renaming of a few things, it looks like a lot of things changing, but again, we'll bring you back maps to show you the ones that really matter, the ones where we're changing somebody from PUD sensitive to an actual use, the ones where we may be reclassifying things based on size. We'll break that up into as many maps as we need so you can understand what it is we're doing.
Okay. So Rick, you're asking just to keep permission, just keep moving
Put
forward
on that process, and we're looking good with what we're proposing in general.
Okay. Any comments from the commission? I don't see any. This was your last part, Rick?
Yeah.
Okay, so next I'm going to ask, is there any comments from staff that'd like to share anything about what's been presented?
Not to make Rick's head big or anything, but it's been very easy to work with Matrix. They've been very responsive to public input and trying to get as much public input as possible. If a public makes a comment, we see the change in the very next meeting or the very next email that they make. I think the commissioners made a very good choice in the company they chose to do this, and we have all the confidence in the world in what they're doing, and we're happy with where they are in the process.
Thanks, PJ. So you're done, Rick, right?
We'll throw another advertisement out there. We're having public workshops the next 3 nights. Come join us in Hill City at the high school tonight at 6 p.m. We're out at Wall tomorrow night at 6 p.m. in their community center, City Hall. And then Thursday night we'll be in the Black Hills University Center just on the border of Rapid City and Box Elder. So please join us, and you can weigh in and chat about everything that's in this handout and get your own copy at the public workshops.
Well, thanks, Rick. I'm going to do one more time. I'm just going to ask, is there anybody from the public that would like to speak or share anything that with the comprehensive plan so far? If not, then I appreciate your hard work, Rick, and the staffs for this, and hopefully we get some good turnouts at these next 3 meetings.
Got Felipe here with us as well. He's helping us out and making sure we're to the meetings tonight. And otherwise, thank you very much for your time this
Thanks,
morning,
Rick.
and look forward to your inputs.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is the Pennington County Campus Petition Circulation Code of Conduct. With a little backup on this was brought up at our last meeting by Mr. Farabee with concerns of the petitioning inside the courthouse with inclement weather and so forth, which this kind of sparked a lot of conversation as far as the code of conduct itself need to be reviewed and so forth. So at this time, I think what I'm going to do is I'd ask Jay Alderman to come up and give us an explanation, because they did, Jay, at the request of the commission, you reviewed this and went and you found out there's some more work that needs to be done and so forth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jay Alderman with the State's Attorney's Office. Yes, I appreciate the opportunity to address this, and it's timely. It needs to be addressed. Right now, as you know, we have a single code of conduct for what I would call a First Amendment activity, and that's petition circulating. And you have probably in front of you now. I've reviewed it since I learned that it was going to be on the agenda. And there's everything from some typos to some outdated descriptions of where activities can take place, particularly given the remodel at the courthouse. There's some other things that simply need to be edited in there. And I know the primary issue, I think, today was to look at that definition of inclement weather and who would be responsible for making that call. As a little background, I can tell you that for many years, I've heard from a lot of different folks that are concerned about, especially the folks that have to implement some of this. You know, our sheriff's office is largely in charge of determining when inclement weather has occurred to allow people in the door. Our office administrator for the commission has been involved in having to direct traffic and try to explain. And to be honest, that definition is really unworkable. It's very subjective. It's difficult to, on a daily basis, be consistent with how you implement that. Right now, it says if the weather is at or below freezing temperature, or weather which is actively storming, including both snow and rain. Questions are, does wind chill factor into this, for instance? How much is enough rain? How much is enough snow? And then when it drops off, I guess you have to kick people out if you've let them in, because the only way you get in is if it does meet that threshold. And as you know, in South Dakota, if you don't like the weather, give it 10 minutes. So frankly, our weather can change dramatically. It can be storming here and not 3 blocks from here. I've seen it. We've all seen it. After talking with a number of folks, including last week, meeting with a number of people that have responsibilities for our courthouse, public safety building, this building, to be honest with you, the preference, and I know there would be other other thoughts on this matter, but the preference is to simply not allow petitions circulating indoors in any of the county facilities. I say that for the reason of what I've just described with an unworkable definition. It's very subjective. It's not consistent. It can't be consistent given our weather. And the fact that I've become aware in the last week that we might be the only government building in Pennington County that would allow this. So we're inconsistent with other facilities. There's only one exception I know of, and I'll tell you about that, but our post office, library, school buildings, school of mines, federal building, civic center, city administration building, do not allow any of these activities indoors, particularly petition circulating. The only exception that I've been made aware of is the Civic Center, when they have events where you can rent a booth, let's say the home show recently. If the booth renter consents to allow somebody in their booth to circulate a petition, they can do that. It's entirely up to that booth renter. And of course, the county campus we have here, we don't have any like events of that nature. We don't have booth rental. My understanding of all of these different facilities, it's a matter of what is the building intended for. This building is for the county row offices to come here and do business. It's not designated as a place for petition circulating and other First Amendment-like activities. It has a very singular purpose, with the exception during Commission Day, this very event we're engaged in right now. So, frankly, what I would like to propose to the Commission is that trying to rework and come up with an inclement weather definition, unless you have some really solid definitions you think are workable, frankly, the impression I get is that we ought not to go down that route. We ought to be more consistent with what other buildings are doing around town, government buildings, so that there is one consistent process and policy around town here. I would like to propose, and this leads me to the more comprehensive reason why I wanted to come up and have an opportunity. Again, over the years, there's been a lot of folks frustrated with trying to know where can they engage in certain activities and what activities are allowed where, at what buildings, on what grounds. We don't have a policy that addresses any of that other than petition circulating. It's probably high time that we broaden the scope of policy for the county and include all of the different, at least at a minimum, this complex that I'd say from the courthouse to this building and everything in between, where we can lay out all forms of sales, solicitation, picketings, another matter, petition circulating, and the like. You can't have a policy that perfectly addresses everything, but we lack anything even reaching near that end goal right now in county. So I would like to do that. I would like, if you are willing, to continue the matter for 2 weeks, allow us to put together something more comprehensive for you to look at and consider. The other thing that we've kind of mulled around and looked at is maybe having a map, working with, I've had some discussions with Mike Cool. If we could have a map of the county complex and even color coordinate with activities can be engaged in these areas, because once again, word of mouth, there can be some inconsistencies of where activities can happen, what part of the sidewalk or what area. I'd like to add that to this, if possible, to just simply help identify and have a more consistent explanation to folks who want to use the properties where they can and under what rules and conditions. So with regard to inclement weather, I don't have a good definition as I stand here. And the folks that I've had communication with would just soon we not go down that road, we change that policy and do something more in line with a comprehensive look at all of the activities as I kind of glossed over here today. So.
Thanks, Jay. I'll take comments. Recognize Mr. DeSanto.
Jay, with the First Amendment, are we going to be in line with that? I don't know. I have no idea what it says as far as access to public buildings is concerned. Where do we stand with limiting
As
that
you know,
access?
you've had quite a bit of experience with Michelle Hoffman in my absence for a while, and Michelle did some initial research along those lines to just kind of give an idea of what activities and where and how they can be regulated. And generally speaking, and we would provide some more of this information to you in a couple weeks. Generally speaking, government buildings are broke down into traditional public forums, designated public forums, and non-public forums. Traditional are the city parks, the Capitol building, the city streets that run parallel to the public right-of-ways. Designated forums are literally that have been designated by a government entity as authorized for particular uses and purposes. Perhaps this county commission meeting could be a designated public forum for this very purpose that we're engaging in today. Non-public forums are virtually everything else, which this building would fall in that category. It's hard to maybe conceptualize it because this is a public building, but it's really a private property that can be managed as such by the county commission, meaning that everything internally inside the building you can manage as you see fit, and you can exclude those activities. This building was built primarily for this particular purpose, which is paying your taxes, meeting with your attorney, a meeting with equalization, register of deeds filings. It's the county road business. The internal sidewalks leading up to the building, you can manage those. Most activities can be engaged in those perimeter sidewalks as a traditional public forum. Everything leading up to the building and inside the building, you have a significant degree of management authority over. And so some of that is what we would like to try to spell out so it's more understandable, and then color coordinate it so it's identifiable to anyone at a quick glance.
Any follow? Mr. Farabee, do you have follow-up?
Obviously, I'm against changing our policy of letting petitioners come in the building. I think we looked at favorably amongst the Pennington County residents for one of the few places that they can petition, exercise their right, and when it's nasty outside, I think that we can use good judgment and continue to let the folks inside. We need to update the policy bit for the courthouse, obviously, and correct some of the typos. And then I noticed one paragraph here or one sentence here where it doesn't make any sense at all. The chair not obstruct, obstruct what? But anyway, no, I'm not in favor of taking away the privilege of letting the folks in when it's bad weather. I'd like to see us lay out in this code of conduct, or whatever you want to call it, who makes the call. And I think that if there's any question, then the chair and the vice chair of the county commission should be the final say on whether or not folks can come inside. Thank you.
Thank you.
And, in addressing some of that, one of the concerns that I would have when you start thinking about if you're on site, if the chairperson if that were the route you'd want to go and you're on site, you'd be in the same circumstance that the sheriff's deputies are. Mm-hmm. But you'd have to be on site, and you're not always on site. You're remote. That can be even more complicated then. The sheriff's deputies that are here all the time, walking the properties, they're in the facilities, they obviously can immediately and instantly give an effort to try to define what that is, but are still limited by all the factors we already discussed. So that just seems unworkable, frankly, to me, to put you in that position. It's already unworkable to put the sheriff's office in that position.
So Jay, I would have a suggestion to move forward with the commission. I would like most of the stuff that you discussed earlier about designating the areas, the maps, rewording this, and as Mr. Farabee says, leaving in there that they could, but I'd also like an alternative that we could discuss, the not allowed in the public building. And the reason, into the courthouse, and the reason why I say that is because this, I think, was originally made up many, many years ago when the entrance to the courthouse was big. And so if you can allow people in, it'd be in that little small area of the entryway. And I think it kind of restricts, and it's pretty restrictive. You know, I think we already allow, as they said, the sidewalks is the area. We allow them up close to the entrance as long as they stay in that area. I think just like anybody else, weather is a factor. I understand that, but I think that happens with elections, that happens with whatever. If the weather's not good enough, nobody's saying they can't come in and warm up, just not solicit inside. I mean, I think the public comes to our administration building to do business. They are customers. And as such, they should be treated as such, which means if you have somebody who's wants to do something over here, they could, but they could walk around over here so they don't have to be solicited in that sense. So I think there's a little more discussion that needs to happen on this, because I do believe we are treating customers, and we should be able to, they shouldn't have to be solicited when they have to come do business. You know, most other businesses have to, it's their choice to let somebody out there sell cookies and do whatnot, but here, people have to come here to do business. They can't say, okay, I don't want to come here because of this, because I have to.
And along those lines too, our buildings and most buildings, they're not designed to accommodate an activity that is unrelated to the purpose of the building. Yeah. And ours fall in that category. We have a bottleneck situation, both at the courthouse and here, where you're trying to direct people at the courthouse through security and get them into what they need to be there to do. And the same thing here. It's very small, very bottlenecked. I see that Donna Mara is here, and she would be the first person that would say that would happen right in front of her office. Yeah. There's frankly not a lot of room for that, and so for public health, safety, the welfare of what we do here, it's not a comment on someone's First Amendment rights, and I don't want my comments to be taken that way. This is a balance, and we allow an awful lot of activities on this campus, and that would be my hope, to continue to show and do that, just not indoors, if that's would be the will of the commission.
Donna?
Morning, Donna Meyer, Pennington County Register of Deeds. I just wanted to add, my staff and I would prefer that the petitioners not be allowed in the building, because when they come in with acoustics, with them asking the people, we then have a difficult time discussing with our customers at the front counter what they're there to do with us, for business with us. If it's more than one petitioner over there, it does become loud enough that we have difficulty talking to the people on the phone, hearing what they're saying. So for us, we would prefer that the petitioners would not be allowed in the building because of the noise and the distraction.
Thanks, Don.
I wanted to share that with you.
Is there any other comment from the audience at this time?
Good morning, gentlemen. Craig Feifley from the 7th Circuit Court. I want to echo Mr. Alderman's comments. I think that it's time for the county complex to have a comprehensive plan as to these types of activities. I just wanted to make one comment that I think is important, that the commission recognize that the more comprehensive the plan is, the less likely the county has the potential to have some liability for some of those subjective decisions. And so I would encourage the commission, in whatever form it takes, to make sure that the plan is both comprehensive and as defined as possible, because if you're leaving decisions that are subjective in terms of who gets access into what areas of the complex, all of which have a little different needs in terms of traffic levels and security, that the likelihood is that the county subjects itself to some liability. Obviously, you're in good hands with your state's attorney's office to manage that problem for you, but just a caveat as you move forward and looking at that plan is that the better defined it is for your complex, I think the better off it is for not only the citizens of the county, but for exposing the county to any potential liability. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Good morning, Janet Saylor, County Treasurer. While we all know the final decision is up to the Board of Commissioners, I'm not doubting that. I would not want petitioners in the building working my line. When people come up to pay their taxes or they come up to license their vehicle, most of the time they don't want to be here because they're giving us money. And I would like to make it very clear when you're writing this that they are not allowed to harass the people in line that are here to do business.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Janet. Mr. DeSanto.
I think that if we were going to write it into the code of conduct, that we would definitely want to designate a very specific area where those petitioners could be. And I completely agree with you that it has to be very, very specific. One of the things that came to thought right off the bat was as far as defining inclement weather, would have been in my mind to simply say if it's below 32 degrees, whether that be with wind chill or not. If it's 47 and it's a wind chill factor of 30, then that, in my opinion, would be defined as inclement weather. And take out snow and rain, because I agree with you, Jay, that sometimes it's snowing. Somebody could say when the flakes are coming down 1 every 3 minutes, it's snowing. Whereas it could also be really coming down and burying them. We never know in South Dakota. So, yeah, I think leaving the snow and the rain in there does make it too subjective to enforce.
Thank you, Mark. I'll ask, Ron, do you have any input on this?
I guess my only comments are, I kind of agree with you, Lloyd, when you said you can't keep them out. They can always come in the court or in the administration building and warm up. That doesn't mean they have to ask people for signatures inside. That's kind of where I would be leaning.
My original suggestion, we are missing one commissioner today, would be to do the redraft, the comprehensive policy regarding the First Amendment activities, as you requested, Jay, and probably leave in, as it states right now, on one part with the inclement weather, as is. They can make adjustments at the next meeting, but I'd also like a second option, option 2 at the next meeting, that not allowed in the public or in the administration or the building. And I think then that gives us enough time in the next couple of weeks to where both sides of the parties can come in, we can have a good discussion. We're short one commissioner, and I think we need a full commission to weigh in on this. But I think we come back, and how much time do you think you need to do the redraft of the zoning that you talked about and so forth? Do you need 2 weeks, a month?
I think we can have something for you to look at in a couple weeks.
Something to look at.
Yeah, and so if I understand it, what you'd like to see is that comprehensive look at it, but still have a paragraph in there that you could choose to leave in or take out with regard to the inclement weather piece of it.
Exactly.
Right. I don't know that I'll be able to have the map. We'll see how that goes. That may not be readily available in 2 weeks.
No.
But I think we can have at least a good draft starting point of a more comprehensive look at all the different activities and where that might be engaged in.
I think that's a good start for us if we can agree as a commission today to do that, because I think that gives us time to think about this and actually go over, because this brought up a lot of different stuff when this was a simple talk about weather, brought up a lot of different items and about how consistent we are in our community with this and so forth, and the passion of it. And I think another 2 weeks is going to give the commission some time to really dig into it and look at the facts, and also the public to be able to come back and give us some more feedback. So I don't know, we really,
We don't need a vote on it.
I don't think you need to do a motion to direct me. I think I know my
do.
charging orders at this
Okay.
point, so I'll have something available.
Okay, Mr. DeSantos, one more comment.
Would it be possible also, Jay, to find out if some of the other larger counties, what their rules are? Minnehaha, and where Aberdeen, Watertown, that area?
And
Let me,
Follow up by
Mr. Chair,
Fairby.
let me repeat my position. As long as the state of South Dakota, namely the legislature, allows we the people to petition, whether it's a school district or city or county or state itself, I think we should accommodate the folks in that endeavor as much as we can, including being inside if the people are unruly. Obviously, if the people are unruly, and here's a list of conduct they can probably add to. And it's like a nuisance. A police officer or a county sheriff says that you're being a nuisance. What does that mean? Is that defined? But that's just an illustration. Let's use some common sense. Thank you.
thank you. I think got your direction.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jake. Next, we have items from the auditor. KJ.
Good morning, KJ Peterson, Chief Deputy Auditor. Just one agenda item this morning. That would be the approval for retail on-off sale malt beverage and retail on-off sale wine license for Under Canvas Mount Rushmore. I do have a response back from the planning director regarding that there are no violations. However, I was informed by Vicki Wolf in our office, who handles all of our renewals on liquors, that we would request the board approve these licenses pending the Planning Commission's approval on April 9th. And that way we will not have to re-advertise and go through this process all over again, rather than just approving it with the pending approval of the Planning Commission on the 9th of April.
So your request for the motion is to approve the alcohol license pending the Planning Commission's approval on April 9th.
Correct.
So moved.
Moved by Farabee,
Second?
seconded by DeSanto. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye in the roll call vote.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
Yes.
LaCroy.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Wouldn't you guys want to take a 5-minute break?
Shannon, I think I would move that we take a 5-minute break.
Is that okay? Wow.
I've had like an hour and a half's break back there.
Motion's been made to take a 5-minute recess. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. All in favor, say aye by roll call.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto.
Aye.
Farabee,
Yes.
LaCroy.
Aye. Next, we come up to items from equalization. I recognize Shannon.
Good morning, Shannon Rittberger, Director of Equalization. You've got several abatement requests. The number one there is for Mr. Feuerbacher. He is requesting an abatement for a veteran's exemption. Mr. Feuerbacher has applied for the vet's exemption for the 2018 assessment year, and he qualifies. The abatement request here is for the 2017 year. He is here. I would suggest that he come forward and speak, and then I'll have a couple comments.
Okay. Mr. I don't even want to try to pronounce it. I'll mess it up. People do it to my name all the time too, so. Just please identify yourself with it.
Yeah, I'm John Feuerbacher.
That mic there works.
This one here. My name is John Feuerbacher. I go by Brandon. So it'll be
Maybe your attorney would like to speak on your behalf.
Mr. LaCroix. Yes, Brandon is my son-in-law. He's married to my daughter, Christiana. And so I'm here to help them. I submitted to you a memo that described the situation. The position is that on November 1, 2016, which is the deadline to apply for this exemption, Brandon did not qualify at that time. He had not yet been rated as 100% permanent disability. But as of January 1, 2017, just 2 months later, he did qualify. He didn't receive that determination until April, but it was retroactive to January 1. So he qualified for the entire year of 2017. But because he missed the deadline, which he didn't even qualify at the time of the deadline, the exemption is being denied. So under SDCL 10-4-40, there's a specific provision, and I submitted that to statute. There's a specific provision that says if you miss the deadline, you can go and ask the commissioners for an abatement. And so that's what we're doing here. We're asking that the first $100,000 of the value of their property for 2017 be exempt from tax, and that the taxes for 2017 be recalculated to the amount it would be with that $100,000 exemption.
Okay, thank you. Shannon?
The statute Mr. Knutson referred to, 10-440, allows an exemption for a 100% permanently disabled veteran. Mr. Feuerbacher is rated that now. It, as Mr. Knutson says, allows an abatement if a veteran misses the deadline, but if he would otherwise have qualified for the exemption. That's an important part of that statute. If he otherwise would have qualified but missed the deadline. As Mr. Knutson just stated, on the assessment date of November 1st, 2016, he was not 100% permanently disabled. So he did not qualify. If he would have applied in 2017, he would not have qualified, would not have received it. SDCL 10-4-19.1 states that any exemption shall be determined with respect to the assessment date. In this case, that assessment date was November 1st, 2016. He didn't qualify then, and because he didn't, he can't ask for an abatement at this time.
Okay, thank you. Any further?
I would like to say that filing in November 2016 is for the next year. It's for the year of 2017. And so the VA dated that letter January 1st, 2017, intentionally for benefits, because it opens up a slew of benefits when you get made permanent. I've been temporary for 5 years. And so what you're filing for in November 2016 is for the full tax year of 2017. There was no way for me to, the law doesn't state, the statute doesn't state that I need to be disabled November 2016 to qualify for a benefit in the following year. It doesn't say that anywhere in there, that I need to be disabled the prior year, I guess.
Okay.
I would argue that it absolutely does. 10-4-19.1 states that any exemption shall be determined with respect to the assessment date.
Okay. One more, go ahead.
One additional comment. In my memo, I offer you other statutes on abatement that allow abatement when the board finds that the tax is, what's the words I use, invalid for any reason, and one of those is that it's exempt. The 1018-1.1 allows the board to abate in case an assessment is inequitable or unjust. The fact that 10-4-40 specifically provides that the board can abate under these circumstances where you missed the deadline. And it's also contained in 10-18-2 sub 10, which authorizes the board to abate taxes pursuant to 10-4-40. What I'm saying is, in two different places, the legislature has given you the ability to abate taxes for disabled veterans. And in this case, because of a technicality, that the tax, Mr. Furbacher, is deprived of the benefit that the legislature intended for one full year that he should be able to receive. And so we ask the board to abate the taxes for 2017.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. DeSanto.
He wasn't awarded his full disability until January 1st, right?
Correct.
Did they show that there was a full disability retroactively back into 2016?
Yes, sir. So I've been 100% since retroactively of November 2011. But the key word in there is permanent total.
That's
So
what I'm talking about.
they wanted to make sure my issues are, they were static.
So were you permanent and total retroactively prior to November 1st of 2016?
They did not retroactive the permanent total until, I was not considered permanent total until January 1st, 2017.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
You have a copy of that determination there?
Sorry?
Yes.
You have a copy of the determination?
Yeah.
Mr. Farabee.
Should have been in our packet, but,
Well, there was some medical information.
yeah, understand.
As I understand it, the decision was in April of 2017, retroactive back to January 1st,
That's what I'm understanding.
but not before then.
Well, Mr. Farabee's reading that. Jay, did you have a comment?
Just briefly, Mr. Chairman, Jay Alderman with the State Attorney's Office. As you know, I have great respect for Don, but I am going to have to disagree today with a perspective on this, and I have to agree with Mr. Rittberger's interpretation here. There's a lot of state statutes that set deadlines, and they can be harsh deadlines given your circumstance. I think of the owner occupied. You can miss that by hours or a day, and it's a pretty harsh penalty. We all know about that. The legislature clearly set this as an exception to that deadline, but with a condition, if you are otherwise qualified. And I think we've learned here today that the applicant was not otherwise qualified on that day. And as Mr. Rittberger put it in perspective, think about it. If on November 1st, which we have a statute that specifically says you consider exemptions as of the assessment date, which we know is November 1st. So there's your deadline. If the applicant did have that retroactive rating back to November 1 of 2016, he would have been qualified as of that assessment date, and he would have received the benefit. He wasn't qualified. He missed the deadline, so the statute says, well, you can miss that deadline as long as you were qualified. He wasn't. It's harsh. I would agree. He missed it by, what, 2 months? But that's the statute that we have and we're dealing with, and it's the specific statute. You know, the general comments under the abatement statutes are for those actions where you would otherwise qualify and you figure there's some unjust outcome if you don't have a statute that addresses it. You're left with, what do we do? Maybe we can do something under the abatement statute. That's a wholly separate matter. Here we do have the statute specifically on point. As we know, the specific overrides the more general statute. This one addresses this situation literally, and Mr. Rittberger is correct. You have to be qualified as of that date. The only exception is we give you a break if you missed the application. Geez, I was qualified, I missed that application. Can I put it in an application now? The answer is yes. And Mr. Rittberger would have to recommend approval if you were otherwise qualified. That's not the case we have here, unfortunately.
So Jay, please help me clarify some of the legal parts of this. What happens if the commission choose to agree with the abatement and go back and do the 100,000 for the taxes?
Well,
I mean, besides that,
Maybe
we're
I'd have
opening
to- I might have
the
to-
door for everybody else, but
well, yeah, I mean, it would change the direction and the policy that, to my knowledge, has always been in place. You would deny this application for the reasons that have been stated here, at least on the county's perspective. I know there's a concern with regard to the auditor and/or treasurer of authorizing and doing an abatement where they feel it is illegal to do so. I know that has other repercussions for their particular personal jobs and are very reluctant to go down that road. So I don't know what to tell you other than we have an opinion and perspective I think has been adhered to consistently. I would advise you not to go down that road and change that historic perspective.
thank you. I'm going to go to some of these other commissioners for comment. Marcus spoke. Mr. Farabee, would you like to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a hang up on SDCL 10-18-1.1. Like many statutes, unfortunately, it's not very clearly written, but it does use the word inequitable, refund of invalid, inequitable, or unjust tax, and I key on the word inequitable. And unfortunately, we live with a system of federal government of dates, and to me, it's inequitable, I guess is the right word. This statute talks about going back as far as 4 years back, abating and refunding taxes, and for me, from the standpoint of equity, I think we should approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farabee. Ron, do you have any input?
Well, I'm sure all of you there, I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt and approve it. But we got to follow the law too, and our legal advisor, and I believe that it's probably not appropriate.
Thank you, Ron. I think looks like there was a member of the audience that'd like to speak. Is there anybody from the public that'd like to speak on this?
Yeah, Mr. Commissioner, Dan Richer, 100% disabled veteran. I think the applicant is asking for one thing, common sense. Just common sense. 1 January to 31 December, he's disabled. He missed the cutoff, not on account of him. It wasn't like he had made the mistake. It's the VA and their system that takes them forever to get anything done. 5 years is temporary. 5 years to prove that he's 100% permanently disabled. 2 months. I think that's all he's asking for is common sense.
Thanks,
Thank
Dan.
you.
I think, Janet, we got one more for. Go ahead, Janet.
Janet Saylor, Treasurer. I'm not against any veterans. I want you to know that up front. However, if it does not fall into the criteria, the auditor will not do the abatement, because if she does, I become personally liable for those taxes. And at that point, I'm coming back to the commissioners for you to pay them. Just for the record. So Julie's not here today, but I know she's always said that if it doesn't fall under that criteria of an abatement, she will not grant the abatement.
Thank you, Janet. We have another person from the public.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Ernie Getty. I'm a resident of Rapid Valley, and I'm a veteran. I have a couple of preliminary questions and then an additional comment. Are we free to speak of the amount of the tax in question here?
I think the abatement's for $1,800, if I'm correct.
Yes, that's correct.
So the amount is for $1,800.
$1,800. And going forward, would he receive this relief in subsequent years going forward? Would he qualify for subsequent years?
He does now. He qualifies from here on out. Because
Okay.
he can fill out the papers, and he did in November this year, so this is for past.
Okay. I understand this is a very difficult area that we're in here. 100% disability is a very high bar. I'm not service connected in any way, so that doesn't influence my opinion here. My opinion here is to do the right thing. The number, and I don't know the numbers, of 100% disabled veterans, but that number has to be very small. I don't know what that number is, but it has to be very small. And I can't believe that some relief for this gentleman here in this case would impact us in a significant way. So it's my opinion that we should give this gentleman relief. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ray. I think I'd make my comment now. I think at this point in time, I would think it'd be wise to continue this to the next meeting. So we have 5 commissioners here, not 4. This could end up possibly in a 2-2, or could be 3-1. I don't know. I'm throwing this out there to you folks if you want to continue this.
I'd like to make a statement on what was addressed about legality. So before it got to this point, obviously I didn't want to come, the drama, this is a big deal to me coming up in front of you guys. I called, and take this with a grain of salt, because you guys conducted counties in the way you want to conduct them. I called 10 other counties in South Dakota and spoke with the Director of Equalization and gave them the dates, the exact scenario, and every single one of them told me they would give me this exemption. And that's when I knew I was going to come forward and do this. I gave them ways out, so I don't think it's illegal. Because if this is a state statute and all these other counties are doing this, then all the other counties are breaking the law. That spoke volumes to me. Not one person told me they wouldn't give me the benefit at these other counties.
I understand that. I'll still throw out my option for the continuance. Mr. Farabee.
Well, Mr. Chair, let me repeat that SDCL 10-18-1-1, I think, gives us discretionary power under the phrase or under the word inequitable. And invalid, unjust don't fit, but inequitable does. And I'll maintain my position. I think we ought to go ahead and vote. If it's 2-2, it goes to the next meeting anyway.
It's Jay. 2-2 goes to the next meeting, Mr. Farabee says?
Correct, it would.
So that would continue it anyhow.
But automatically continue.
Okay. My suggestion, I'd go back to, are you guys okay with the continuing to the April 1st meeting? I think it's April 6th. Is that
My calendar.
acceptable? And the reason why I say that is you come up and you present it, that gives us some time to think about this too. I mean, before all we've had is paperwork. And we can read anything we want into the paperwork. This gives us 2 weeks we've met you, we've talked to you, to give us time to soak it all in.
Yes, sir.
So you're okay with the continuance?
Yes, sir, I'm fine with that.
Yes.
So the applicant's okay with the continuance to the next meeting? Is the commission okay with that?
I'll move to continue.
Moved by DeSanto to continue to our next meeting,
Second.
seconded by Buskerud. All in favor indicate by saying aye and a roll call vote.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
Yes.
and LaCroy.
Aye. Thank you.
So number 2 on the agenda is 3 abatement requests. These are pretty simple. 2 of them are for Country Village Estates for the 2016 year and the 2017 year. There was a mobile home that had incorrect title and serial number, and we discovered that because of those errors, it was on the tax roll twice. The third one is Haroldson. This was a mobile home that was tore down in 2013. The 2015 taxes were deemed uncollectible, and the abatement request is for 2016.
Look for a motion to approve the abatements as presented.
Move for approval.
Moved by DeSanto,
Second.
seconded by Buskerud. Any discussion from public or board? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye in the roll call vote.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Fairby,
Yes.
LaCroy.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Next, we come to item 16, items from the Highway Department.
Mark Schock, Pennington County Highway. We're coming today with our annual bridge inspections request. Federal regulation requires that all bridges with an opening of 20 foot or greater be inspected every 2 years. Box culverts, concrete box culverts with an opening 20 feet or greater are every 4 years. We are, this year, Pennington County has approximately 62 bridges that need to be inspected. We have attached a list of engineering firms that have been pre-approved by the state of South Dakota. Under the federal bridge inspection program, which uses bridge replacement funds, there's a program that helps states to pay for the bridge inspections. That is administered through the state, of course. We have selected Bros Engineering to do our bridge inspections for 2018. They have worked for us doing bridge inspections recently, and we feel they've done a very good job. Upon selection of an engineering firm, the DOT will issue a work order, and Pennington County will need to concur with the work order. Pennington County will be required to pay 20% of the bridge inspections under this program. Under this program, it's also able for the cities of Box Elder, Hill City, and I believe Keystone has participated in the past also with bridge inspections under the same engineering firm that Pennington County uses. We would recommend approval of the attached program resolution, selecting Bros Engineering Incorporated of Sturgis, South Dakota to perform 2018 bridge inspections in Pennington County.
Thank you, Mark. So your recommendation is to approve and have the chairman sign the attached bridge re-inspection program resolution requesting SDDOT to hire Bros Engineering, Inc. of Sturgis to perform our 2018 bridge inspections. That's your recommendations?
Correct.
Okay.
So moved.
Moved by DeSanto.
Second.
Seconded by Busker. Comment, Mr. Farabee.
One quick question. What's the total bill estimated?
Last year, the bill was $12,508. The 4-year average is about $10,650. That's Pennington County's 20%
That's our 20%. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Public or board? Seeing none. All in favor indicate by saying aye with a roll call vote.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Fairby,
Yes.
LaCroy.
Aye. Item 17. Item 17 is a request for second approach at 1702 East Highway 44, Lot 41, Mr. Scott Moore. Scott, please recognize yourself for the record.
I'm Scott Moore. The address, that's my address, but the property address is a lot 2, Block 22 in Trailwood Village. I just want to make that clarified. I'm in the process of building a fourplex on this lot. It's been zoned for that. And the ordinance is kind of gray as far as it used to say one access per lot. Now it says 1 per residence, and there's going to be 4 residents on this. So I'm just asking for a second approach. That way, I've been approved for one approach, which would be up to 50 foot, and people would be backing out into the street at an angle if we did that. So I'm just asking for a second approach. It'd be 2 20-foot approaches to try and get people to back out straight into the street. Mark kind of didn't have a opinion either way, but wanted to get your guys' blessing on this.
Yes. Mark, could you please help us out with some background information on?
Yes, Mr. Moore is correct. In fact, that ordinance 14 formally stated that there'd be 1 approach per parcel. That was revised. I don't remember the revision date. It does state now that 1 approach per residence would be approved. But this case is not usual. This is in the city's plating district, and on that lot, it's been approved. My understanding is it was platted for a 4-plex. Now to put 4 driveways out into that road doesn't seem very safe. Mr. Moore is proposing 2 driveways, as was shown on his plan. I've got some statistics here if you want some numbers. The ADT is average daily traffic in this area is 537 cars per day. That was in September 10th of 2015. That's the most recent traffic count we have. We do our counts every 3 years, so it'll be due in 18 here again. The speed limit's 25 miles an hour. And it looks like most people are abiding by that, the 85th percentile, or in other words, 85% of the people that pass this area are driving 24 miles an hour, so just a mile under the speed limit. If we could go back to the map, overhead map, please. As you'll see in this neighborhood, directly across the street are duplexes or townhomes with double garages on those. The only difference here is those lots split the house. You'll see a 0 setback on those properties. Now the properties that are to the east and to the west of Mr. Moore's property, those are multi-family units also, with more of a parking lot style, single access, which is better that, the cars are facing forward when they go into the street. But with the proposed building, there's a garage on the front of each unit, which only leaves a 25-foot setback. So it doesn't appear that he has room for the parking lot style approach here. I guess the next best thing other than a single approach would be 2 approaches, of course, rather than the 4. I think we'll leave the decision up. I'd like to leave the decision up to the board as to what they would like to do.
Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mark. Mr. DeSanto has a question.
In your plan, is there room for them to back and then pull out onto the street going forward? Or will they have to back out onto the street? They'll have to back out. We talked about that, if we had room to make a turnaround, that way they could pull out onto the street. But 25 foot is just basically enough to park a car into, not to try and back around another car in that short area. And I also looked at eliminating, when I was doing the design, not doing the garages and doing something similar to the property to the west, but I wouldn't be able to get the required amount of parking spaces on site doing it that way. I personally think that I'd be fine with two accesses, not 4. Two.
So Mr. DeSanto, Mr. Farabee?
Where is the one approach that's approved now? Where is it on that diagram?
It can be placed anywhere along the front of the
Well,
lot.
You haven't picked that yet.
No, if I were to do it, I would have to center it on the two. And right now, the way this is drawn, there's about 30 foot in between the two, so it would work well for.
You can't center it like this, and I don't know what direction that is for sure, but the unit would be to your left, I guess.
If I were to.
There's one approach there.
If I were to center it, I wouldn't, the two center units on what's on the overhead here, they would be able to back out straight into the street, but the two outside units would be backing out at an angle, which is an unsafe situation.
How, you got a follow-up?
So then, if you have two approaches, where are you going to put them?
The way I have it drawn here on this diagram here, where the driveway is 28 foot wide, and we're putting a 20-foot approach to try to get them centered or backing out onto the street as straight as we can.
Okay, I see now. You done?
Yeah, I'm done,
Okay.
thanks.
My question is I think the two approaches make sense because they'd be by the garages coming out from the garage. And
Yeah.
That kind of makes sense to be able to have, how wide are these approaches going to be?
The 20-foot throats.
He does have 20-foot proposed there. That is minimum under ordinance 14. Wider may be safer, so they can back, if they're gonna back out straight or back out, they should probably be backing out straight rather than having to angle into a narrower approach. I guess we wouldn't be opposed to that if that's the direction that the commission wants to go.
My personal opinion is from seeing this, I would want their approaches big enough to where they could back out so that they're not hitting the curb or trying to maneuver, having to come back, turn, and then take a left or right. I think the approach should be about the same as what the garage is. And I don't know what that is.
It's 28 feet, and I'm not opposed to making the approach as wide as the driveway.
Good, okay. Mr. Chair.
Mr. DeSanto.
Is, in between the driveways, is that a no parking zone?
Yes, that is going to be grass.
Okay. And I mean, once you get to the street, when you're packing out onto the street, can people park in between the driveways?
I don't think there's going to be enough area there. It would have to be
That'd
a
be a
really
concern.
small car to be able to park there.
All right. Yeah, because if you've got a pickup truck or something, they're going to block view from.
Especially if we make the approaches wider. You might be able to park a motorcycle there, and that'd be about it.
That's not going to impede view. Good. All right. I'm fine.
I have a motion, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Farabee.
I move that we continue this item until next meeting for the highway to go out and take another look and come back with a plan.
There's been a motion on the floor.
Mr. Chair, I would make a substitute motion.
Let me kill the first one first.
All right.
Motion dies for lack of a second. Now I'll recognize Mr. DeSanto.
I would move to approve with the entrances being the 25 feet wide.
25 or
28.
28, okay.
Would you be okay to a friendly amendment to that?
Amendment?
Friendly.
Sure.
I'll second this first one, then make a friendly amendment, up to 28. That way that gives them two can get together. If it needs to be 24, 25.
Up to 28, as long as they can back straight out of their garage into the street.
Is that appropriate, Mark?
That sounds appropriate to me, yes. Right now, he does have an approach permit that has been approved for a single approach. If you do make a motion to accept the two, or do pass a motion to accept his proposal for two, approaches, we would supersede this number with another
Right.
approach permit.
Two approaches.
So the motion on the floor is to approve the two approaches, and each approach, two approaches up to 28 feet per approach.
Per approach, 28
Yeah.
feet per approach. Okay. Got it.
Any further discussion?
And that's
Mr. Farabee?
that's for him to determine, or county highway to determine,
Between
or?
the two of them, we can say Mark.
Approaches, permits are approved through us. We typically write in those numbers. If you say up to 28 is what you're proposing. Yes, that would be acceptable. If that's what the driveways are gonna be, at 28, that's probably what we would write it at, is 28 on the permit.
I just wanted to have a little flexibility. You okay?
And he will approve the exact location, a county
Right.
highway. Okay.
Any further discussion?
Do I need to amend it saying that Mark will approve?
I think,
I just put
I
that.
think it's good.
Okay, because they approve it anyway.
I think we're good with
Yeah.
that here.
So all in favor
We
indicate.
need a second. Nobody
No, I
seconded.
seconded
Oh, you
it.
did? Okay.
Yeah. I seconded it so I could make the friendly amendment. That's right. All in favor indicate by saying aye in the roll call vote.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
Yes.
LaCroy.
Aye. Next, we come up to item 18. It's a request for county action regarding noise and diesel pollution on Morris Lane. Mr. and Mrs. Danny Lee Hendrickson. Danny?
Yes, my name is Denny Hendrickson, resident of Pennington County, at the intersection of Raider Hill Road and Morris Lane. And I have a neighbor who's a renter, and he has a trucking business he runs from the property. And I have several letters of a complaint over the years, which first started when he brought in his semi-truck plus 4 trailers and tried to set up that much there, and so I was objecting to that. And we finally did, through the complaint, we did get a verbal agreement that he would be limited to 1 truck, 1 trailer, and also would be limited to no excessive idling. And I felt this was fair because he is a family person who has a business. He needs to provide income. So anyway, about every 6 months, the escalates to above what the verbal agreement was to additional trailers. And then I've had to write another letter, and it's gone back to where it should have gone. And now the latest one is the excessive idling. On top of that, I was pretty impressed about, let's say a year ago, he seemed to have bought a new truck, brand new truck, was really quiet and really could not ever smell that diesel. And I thought, let it run. Well, unfortunately, about 4 or 5 months ago, he come back from out of town with loud pipes. And like a very few percentage, maybe 5% of truckers seem to think it's impressive to go on East Highway 44, Rare Hill Road, Elko Road with the jake brakes. And so that's now the type of trucker he's become. And then he's also brought up the level of idling to several hours with the loud pipes and also with the pollution. I'm an old guy. I'm not in the checkout lane, but my life is towards the end. But we have a 7-year-old girl. And with that in mind, I would not prefer to have diesel fumes coming towards my property. So I would just ask, I'm not asking that no more trucking. I would just ask we bring it back down to the level I thought we had agreed upon.
Thank you, Dan. Do we have any comments from Mike?
There is a video I have as proof. Was that on?
Dan, I think we need to get a little bit of background from Mike and maybe some of the ordinances that are in place to address so we can, because really right now, we can just acknowledge your concern.
I'm Mike King. I'm the Ordinance Enforcement Officer for Pennington County. I know Mr. Henderson started maybe 3 years ago when I first got on. So he is, in reference to his complaint, I have Ordinance 106. That's what my guidelines are. I can give you a copy of them if you'd like to see. So.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Okay. So make it short and sweet. He came in March 12th and Gate wrote a complaint. Diesel semi trucks, several trailers, just like he explained, idling several hours at a time, resulting in diesel pollution, that type of thing. My ordinance that I have of now does not regulate that, and does not regulate the noise, and does not regulate the fumes. I did tell Ms. Henderson, I did go out to the property. I told him, I said, there's nothing I can do except I can talk to him and see what's going on. And I did. And yes, they have a diesel truck. They crank it up, let it idle. Of course, it's a diesel semi truck. They said they didn't think that they did anything out of the, to be mean. They just let it run. And so I'll advise them that there's no violation that I can do anything with, but I'd appreciate them if they could bring it down. That'd be appreciated by Mr. Henriksen. And they said that they want to get along with him, but I mean, you got that level there. So that's that teeter-totter. But as far as the county's concerned, there's nothing I can do to force them to do anything as far as the truck noise or anything like that.
Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
I'll recognize Mr. DeSanto.
Mike, under public nuisance, it says unlawful doing any act or omitting to perform a duty which act or omission annoys, injures, or endangers the comfort, repose, health, or safety of others. And then it renders the ground, the water, the air, or food a hazard or an injury to human health. Is that
right?
Not
so
specific?
I
can understand that it wouldn't affect whether he's parking 4 or 10 trailers there.
Right.
Because that doesn't, it might not look nice, but it's doesn't create a public nuisance. But with the diesel fumes.
So when you're talking about, and I've had this about 3 different times. I've had to run it through the state attorney's office.
Okay.
Because when they define public nuisance, it's more than one. So if it's you and your neighbor, that doesn't define public. Now, if it's you and your neighborhood, like your whole association per se would come in and say, you know what, this is a problem and we're all doing this, then that would actually be more of a public nuisance than it would be just individual.
Okay. Thank you. That explains that.
Any further comments? I tend to agree with you, Mike. I think you've done your diligence by going and talking to the attorney's office and doing your best, and even going and talking to the neighbor forum to work with it. And that's the first steps of trying to do all of it. And I think, Denny, you've tried yourself, and what it comes down to is 2 neighbors got to find a way to work together to do it. The commission really has no authority to go in and tell them to shut down and remove his trucks or anything along those lines. But I think, from what I sense from the commission, they hear your concerns, and we appreciate Mike's work for at least trying to go in and talking and doing the best what he could do beyond what he's allowed to do. But at this point in time, there's really nothing that we can do to address this for you.
No, I'll accept that, and I do thank Mike for doing what he can there, and I'm hoping that with a little gentle pressure that it can be brought down to just a reasonable level.
Yeah.
So that's the best I can hope for.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Denny.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, folks. Next, we have items from planning and zoning, which was supposed to be at 10:30. Do they need a little time to get back? Oh, there they are. Okay.
Hi. PJ Conover, Director, Planning Department. Items before you are item 19 for items from Planning and Zoning. The Board of Commissioners uses a consent agenda to act on a non-controversial and routine planning and zoning items quickly. The consent agenda is acted on by one motion and vote of the board. Items may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda at the request of a board member or a citizen. The consent agenda for Planning and Zoning contains the following items. Item A, first reading and public hearing of Major Plan Unit Development Amendment 1801 for Deerfield Cabins LLC. Bless you.
Thank you.
And it's recommended to be continued to the May 1st, 2018 Board of Commissioners meeting. Item B, first reading and public hearing of Rezone 1710 and Comprehensive Plan Amendment 1709 for Dorothy Johnson Estates, Great Western Bank Personal Representative for Dorothy Johnson Estates. Recommended to be continued to the May 1st, 2018 Board of Commissioners meeting. Item C, layout plat 1738 for Dorothy Johnson Estates, Great Western Bank Personal Representatives for Dorothy Johnson Estates. It's been recommended to be continued to the May 1st, 2018 Board of Commissioners meeting. Item D, layout plat 1803 for Carrie and Sabrina Johnston. It's been recommended to be continued to the April 3rd, 2018 Board of Commissioners meeting. Item E, vacation of easement 1801 for Carrie and Sabrina Johnston. It's been recommended to be continued to the April 3rd, 2018 Board of Commissioners meeting. Item F, minor plat 1802 for Tom and Ann Slaughter, and approval has been recommended. Item G, road construction within a section line right-of-way review, CS 1602 for Cody Shad. It's been recommended to be continued to the May 1st, 2018 Board of Commissioners meeting.
Thank you, PJ. Is there anybody from the public that would like any of those items removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, is there any from the board? Seeing none, I'd look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move to approve with continuances.
Second.
Moved by DeSanto, seconded by Buskerud. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye with a roll call vote.
Buskerud?
Aye.
DeSanto?
Aye.
Farabee?
Yes.
LaCroy?
Aye. Now we come to
Thank you.
regular agenda items.
So next agenda item is item H, layout plat 1801 and subdivision regulation variance 1801 for Idlewild Mountain Lodging, Fisk Land Surveying as the agent. And there is a representative from Fisk Land Surveying here in the audience today for any questions. The request is to combine two lots to create lot 31 revised in block E of MS 1016 in Idlewild Mountain Development.
So the recommended motion for this is to approve the subdivision regulation variance SV 18-01 to waive submittal of road construction design standards, road improvements of suburban residential zoning for Munich Lane and the Hindenburg Lane per section 500.5, table 1, including turnarounds and dead-end road systems, and approval of layout plat PL 18-1 with 10 conditions. Is that
Yeah, if you
almost?
jump to the
But
end.
I
yeah.
wasn't finished, was I? You weren't
Yep.
finished.
No, it's okay. If you'd like me to go through it, unless the staff report was sufficient.
If the commissioners have further questions, I was just reading what the recommended motion would be.
Sure.
We
Hey.
discussed this, Mr. Chair.
Go
We
ahead,
discussed
Mr.
this in
Senator.
the planning commission meeting, and I would move for approval.
So there's been a motion.
Second.
Second, motion made by DeSanto, seconded by Buskerud. Any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion, I'll recognize PJ.
All right, a question. Was that a motion for approval of the layout plat or the subregs, or are you putting them together?
Was it what I read?
Move for approval on the layout plat,
Okay.
and I will,
Yeah, they just combined them in your memo.
I will
That's what they
combine them.
did.
I
Okay.
move for approval of both.
subdivision and layout plat.
And that's okay with the seconder?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so we got them combined. We all clear on the motion? Kara?
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor indicate by saying aye with a roll call vote.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
Yes.
LaCroy.
Aye.
Thank you.
Good morning, Brittany Molitor, Environmental Planning Supervisor. Item I is Ordinance Amendment OA 1801 to amend Section 204J 3P requirements for on-site wastewater treatment systems. The reason for this ordinance amendment is due to the fact that the National Environmental Health Association, typically known as NEHA, is no longer providing certification for installers pertaining to on-site wastewater treatment systems. And when this portion of the ordinance was proposed, there was a subcommittee that had recommended these certification requirements, and it did get implemented into this section of the ordinance. However, now that they no longer offer that, we need to remove it from the ordinance. So
Okay.
that
Now,
is my-
Brittany, this has to do with I and J both, and you,
yes.
would you
Yes.
like them acted upon separately, or could we combine them?
Yes, please, separately.
Separately? Okay. So the recommendation is for approval of ordinance amendment OA 18-02 is the recommendation from the Planning Commission. Does anybody want to make that motion, or is there discussion?
I'll make the motion to approve the first reading.
Motion made by Buskerud,
Second for discussion.
seconded with discussion by DeSanto. Discussion? Any comments from the public? None? Any from the board? No discussion. With that in mind, we'll go to a roll call vote, please.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
Yes.
LaCroy.
Aye. Item J.
Item J is Ordinance Amendment OA 1802 to amend Section 204J3P Service Providers, O&M, for on-site wastewater treatment systems. Again, this section needs to be amended due to the fact that the National Environmental Health Association is no longer providing certification for installers. This section has to do with O&M certification, which is operation and maintenance, and it's typically of experimental systems, advanced treatment systems, things like that. And prior, we required an advanced testing process to get that. Now that that's not offered, we had to have alternatives in order for O&M providers to provide service to these.
Okay. And this is just for the providers of the service?
Correct, the O&M service providers,
Okay.
yes.
And this comes to us with a recommendation for approval from the Planning Commission. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. DeSanto.
Under general description, it talks about the National Environmental Health Association no longer providing certification for installers. Then under requirements down below, existing text, it says pass the NEHA Advanced Certified Installer Examination.
Right, and that's what we're removing. So if you look in the proposed text, we struck number 2 and we replaced it, because I believe.
Okay, with certified provider
Yes.
approved by planning director is this, okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Very good.
This comes to us with the recommendation for approval from the Planning Commission. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the first reading.
Motion's been made.
Second.
Seconded. Motion made by Busker, seconded by DeSanto. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate aye with a roll call vote.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Yes.
Farabee,
Yes.
LaCroy.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we come to request to refund application fees from Boom Construction. Is it Deanna?
Dane, so item K is a request for refund for application fees from Boom Construction, Dane Boomsma. He sent in an email yesterday, which I believe you all have copies of. He had a family emergency. He's asking for a continuation of his item to the April 3rd, 2018 Board of Commissioners meeting.
Move for continuance.
Moved by DeSanto to continue the April 3rd, 2018 meeting.
Second.
Seconded by Buschrood. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor indicate by saying aye in the roll call vote.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
Yes.
LaCroy.
Yeah, aye.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we come to items from chair and commission members. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share? The only thing I'd say is that Mark and I had attended the workshop in Pierre last Wednesday and Thursday.
Mhm.
And so I thought it was a fairly good workshop. Some good ideas came out of it. I think me and Mark had some good discussions on it, especially how to run a meeting.
How to run a meeting.
How to run a meeting was one of them. And then there was some other discussion on equalization and wheel tax and so forth that we'd had. So I've attended quite a few meetings, but I think that's about the highlight of what I can share at this point in time. I don't know, Mark, had any real highlight that from the...
Well, we had some pretty in-depth discussion on prior to a meeting, discussing business with individual commissioners, discussing business with people that are bringing forth requests for variances and that sort of thing, and how we really need to be very careful about our discussions with individuals that are bringing something before the board, that we should probably instruct the staff to discuss with them as opposed to the commissioners making the discussion. So it was a surprising revelation to me, coming from the people that were doing the presentation.
I tend to agree. I think I just kind of intermixed items and committee reports. So. With that, we'll move on to 2018 legislative session. Holly's got nothing to report on that. Next, we come to item 23, approval of vouchers. We have total voucher of $2,497,091.46. So I'd look for a motion to approve vouchers.
Move for approval.
Second.
Moved by DeSanto, seconded by Buskerud to approve. Any discussion?
Of course, I'll be voting.
Mr. Farabee.
I'll be voting no again. There's some unnecessary spending, in my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Farabee. All in favor of approving the vouchers indicate by saying aye in the roll call vote.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
No.
LaCroy.
Aye. Next, we come to items from the public. Is there any items from the public? Seeing none, we'll move on to executive session, and we have one item for executive session. So I'd look for a motion to go into executive session per SDCL 1-25-2-3 for the purpose of considering contractual issues.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Moved by DeSanto, seconded by Buskerud to go into executive session. All in favor indicate by saying aye in a roll call vote.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
Yes.
LaCroy.
Aye.
Move to come out of executive session.
Moved by DeSanto, seconded by Farabee to come out of executive session. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. You guys still got to do roll call?
No, that's okay since Buskerud's gone.
Buskerud signed off, so, okay. Next on the agenda is to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
So moved by DeSanto, seconded by Farabee to adjourn. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.